Sure. I had, just before I started on Apocalypse Now, I had been working for Fred Zinnemann, who is a director of one of Hollywood's classic periods. This is the film Julia, and I think the editing ratio there was maybe 15 to 1, maybe 20 to 1. And so diving from that swimming pool into the swimming pool of Apocalypse Now, where the ratio ultimately turned out to be 100 to 1, was, a learning experience and a wonderful challenge. There were 3, 4 editors, 5 sometimes, working all simultaneously on different parts of the film. I remember a meeting we had with Francis early on, where I was the new kid in the block. The other editors had been on for years in some cases. And he said, well, I'm going to divide up the work, at least to begin with. The film needs to get crazier and crazier as it goes along. And there's a general principle with this film that if you work on it for any length of time, you become crazy. So I want the film to begin as normally as possible. So Walter, you are the most normal because you haven't worked on it yet. So I'd like you to do the beginning of the film. And the irony is that the beginning of the film is arguably kind of more crazy than anything else in the film. But that was, we all worked together. And the amazing thing about collaboration editorially, which I think it applies to all collaboration, is this, you pick up on each other's skills and predilections without even talking about it. And there's just a kind of an unspoken creative flow that goes on that carries you along with it. And if you had to spell out what each thing in a film requires, you'd never get a millimeter into the film. The film is this leap into the unknown on every level. Vittorio talked about his leap, Francis obviously, and John, and you take this leap and then hope that the creative envelope around you is buoyant enough to sustain you through the voyage.
Cameras shooting, so every camera shooting represented another stream. And I'd like to tell a little anecdote about the beginning, which Walter put together so beautifully. But our one editor, Barry Malkin, was called home by his wife, and I thought, since he had been such a participant, that I would spend whatever it was, Sunday or Saturday with the editors and hang out. They were in a big room. And I don't know if now any of you know, but in the old days, there was always the trim barrels, which was filled with the film that you threw away. Usually that came from the head end of, like, if there was a napalm explosion, there was, God knows, minutes before the explosion when other things were happening, and there were like 5, 6 cameras, or how many cameras. So, and this film, garbage basically, trim was used for the soundtracks to space out the sound. Now, the sound is on, used to, in the old days, on magnetic film, and then you would cut thrown away film turned upside down to space it out. So I was just goofing off and kind of spending time with them, and I reached into a barrel of this film and just at random pulled out a piece of film and put it on a moviola, and it was just a lot of smoke, and occasionally you'd see a helicopter skid go by, and it was just very abstract. And then after a long time, you saw this big explosion, which was, of course, not in the trim bit, but this was the part that was thrown away. And for the hell of it, I looked at another bin, and it was the Doors music. And it said The End. And I just took that, and I said, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we started the movie with the Doors, this is the end, and it's the beginning, but we say this is the end. I put it in the moviola next to this piece of garbage film, and started it, and it was all this kind of weird beginning of that song, and then the helicopter skids and stuff, and ultimately, away what was supposed to be the beginning, because I thought this random grab in the barrel, which could have been any other, it could have been an old print of Snow White, which was also a lot of art. So that's a case of destiny or just chance stuff that helped make the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, the story I heard also was that was at that time, and probably still today, the biggest practical explosion ever done on film by A.D. Flowers. He was the...
Yeah, it was the whole team,
Joe Lombardi.
A.D.
Right,
Flowers.
and
They were
they,
just in heaven.
knowing this in advance, that it was going to be so big, they wanted to at least have a record of it, and so one of the cameras shot at this high-speed rate just to simply have a record of it. But that's the piece that Francis took up, and then became the beginning of the film.
Well,
Was basically a witness on this journey going deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness, and as such, he would be looking at things and feeling something, which of course we would want the audience to have an idea of, or at least to feel that he was a complex man. So I thought, if I could shoot a little scene early on that showed the kind of guy he was, that there he was in a hotel, and there was his revolver on the pillow and a bottle of cognac, and he was looking up at the fan, which Walter very ingeniously added and made a central theme. You know, the fan, when I shot it was just the fan that we saw, but Walter made it a helicopter. And that whole opening where he drinks too much and punches the mirror and behaves in this odd way, I had a dream, actually, this is a true story, I had a dream that somehow the key to getting the actor to really disclose all that was in him, because Martin Sheen is just a lovely person, and such a good person, he's a handsome guy, he's, you know, he was like very open and what have you, but I sensed that maybe there was a lot more to him, and in the dream, oddly enough, it said the key was his vanity. So I got him kind of, you know, in that situation at the beginning, and I started goading him on his vanity, saying, "Oh, look at you." I was sitting right up on a bureau right above the thing, saying, look at yourself in the mirror. You're so handsome. Look at you. You're so handsome. Look at your face. Look at how beautiful you are." And stuff. And he started to get really weird, and he punched his own image in the mirror, and all this poured out of him, you know, and I was in a
including his own blood.
Yeah,
Right?
he punched the mirror. I didn't know he was going to do that. And then I'm thinking, what should I do? He's cut his hand. Should I stop and get the first aid? But if I do that, he's going to be mad at me because he's going through all this, and I stop it. I got to keep letting him play out, you know, as much as I'm sure his wife was angry at me. So I'm sitting there, and so in a sense, we got that strange opening scene, which is what I had hoped for, was that we would have something to say. This is just not an ordinary guy. This is a complicated man who's seen things and has stuff in his soul, in his heart, that it's not easy to understand. And then later on, when you're just seeing this guy looking at stuff, you as the audience, having known that, would read into just a handsome guy looking out, and you would add the audience is 80% of the movie. What you add with your own feelings is really what you're, the flesh and blood people, not the images. And so that was behind the opening. Is that there is some alleged where this movie came from in my mind, and I would like to say where it came from in my mind. First of all, I saw a film by Eugene Jones called The Face of War, 16mm film about, you saw that, about, it had a profound effect on me. Second, your own beloved Werner Herzog made Agira, Wrath of God. That had a tremendous effect on me. And thirdly, another fellow who's here, I had sort of, as you say, painted myself in a corner because this was supposed to be the bridge on the, it was supposed to be, the Guns of Navarro. It was supposed to be a big budget Hollywood movie that would make a lot of money and had a battle at the end. But as we went on the journey, as Vittorio expressed, it started to become more and more surreal. And we started to love the direction, and all of a sudden it was all about colored smoke and all this weirdness. And so as the film became more and more surreal, I started to get really worried. How am I going to possibly end this? because the original script of John, which was a very good ending, was a gigantic, the NRA attacks, right? The regulars attack, and there's a big battle scene, and I didn't know how to do that to end. In fact, when Brando arrived, he looked at me and he chuckled. He said, "Oh, you painted yourself in a corner, haven't you?" Because I didn't have an ending. And I asked everyone to help me with the ending, and many people tried. And I was in terrible shape because, you know, I was sort of financing this movie. I didn't know that I was going to end up financing such a huge thing. But if you check your Google, you'll see what interest. When this movie made? 19.
Came out in 79.
Well, so it was made in whenever. Check what interest rates were in those days. They were over 17%. So it was. I was in an impossible situation I could never get out of, and I knew it. And I was terrified, and I would stay up all night and try to write endings. And I asked one friend who's here tonight, Dennis Jacob. Dennis is a very interesting person, a brilliant person. And I said to him, Dennis, what do you think? And he is the one who said, well, you got to read the Myth of the Fisher King, and you got to read Fraser and The Golden Bough. And I didn't never, so I started reading this stuff. And he says, he's sent to kill the guy. He says, have him kill him. but have him kill him because he wants to be killed, because it's necessary. That's the human story. So with what Dennis had put in my head, I deliriously tried to come up with stuff, and then ultimately another myth is that, and it's true what I've said, I've read some very erudite scholarship that, not true that Marlon hadn't read Heart of Darkness, but when Marlon first showed up, I had it for 3 weeks, and then it was $3 million 3 weeks, and then he was gone. So the first day, we're all in this like houseboat, which is like a trailer, and we're talking, and he's talking about termites and all. Marlon is an unbelievably brilliant man. Beyond acting, he's just the most extraordinary man. And he's talking about all this stuff, and they knock on the door. Well, Francis, what should we do? Should we have lunch? I said, yeah, let's have, we're going to talk through lunch. And we ended up talking in that houseboat for a whole 5 days, and just talking about termites and Vietnam and stuff. But little by little, we were getting it somewhere, and he would sometimes go off on an interesting rant, and I had it all recorded, and I'd take it at home, and I would type it up. But the big thing was he was very big, and I said, why don't we play it like Heart of Darkness? Why don't we cut off all your hair, and you'll be bald, and we'll put you in, we'll play you like a giant, because in a movie frame, if a man is very fat, if you photograph his shoulders, and then when you shoot the long shot, have a 6'7"